So today we're going to be talking about chloride or chlorine. Chlorine is commonly found as a negative ion or Cl-, and it's primarily brought into our bodies through the intake of salt or sodium chloride. I wanted to do chloride because whenever I thought of chlorine, I thought of swimming pools. So it was really interesting to see how chloride was really important to our bodies. Why is chlorine so important to the body? Well, chloride helps maintain fluid balance, and it follows sodium, which keeps electrical levels stable. It also plays a role in controlling the release of fluids, such as pancreatic juice in the small intestine and water and mucus. The fluid release is critical for all of our bodily functions. It's also an electrolyte, and electrolytes are vital to the life of cells, so they must be closely regulated to help maintain the appropriate distribution of bodily fluids. It's also really important in the acid-base balance. Hydrochloric acid is what is commonly known to break down the foods that we digest, so maintaining the acidity in our stomachs is needed for digesting all of the foods that we bring in. The recommended dietary allowances. So according to the European Food Safety Association, as children grow up, they are required to take in more and more chloride per day. So at the age of 1 to 3, you're only trying to intake 1.7 grams per day, but as adults, we're looking to take in 3.1 grams per day, and that doesn't change for pregnant or lactating women. And something interesting to note is that the levels for chlorine are very similar to the levels recommended for sodium. Chloride deficiency is also known as hyperchloremia. So if we break that word down, we're looking at hypo, which means below, chloro, which is chlorine, and emia, which is the substance in the blood. So we're looking at below adequate levels of chlorine in our blood. Deficiency is extremely rare, especially in the US because of the amount of sodium that's in our food. But a loss of chloride will also coincide with a loss of sodium. And some conditions that would cause a deficiency would be long periods of diarrhea, vomiting, and excessive sweating. And some signs and symptoms that doctors would look for would be weakness, nausea, and headaches. On the opposite side, we have chloride toxicity, also known as hyperchloremia. So very similar breakdown for that word, except we're looking at an above average level of chloride in the blood, and just the same toxicity is very rare, but the National Institute of Health would categorize hyperchloremia as a level that is higher than 106 to 111 millimoles per liter of blood, and this may be caused by kidney disease or the ingestion of a lot of salt water or a high salt diet. So sometimes when kids are in the pool and they swallow too much water, they might have a chloride toxicity. It would really depend. But this can also come from severe dehydration, diarrhea, or metabolic problems where the blood becomes too acidic. And some signs and symptoms that we would look for would be muscle weakness, high blood pressure, and fatigue. So here are some foods that I researched when looking for chloride levels in them. We're not going to go through all of these, but we are going to go through about the first 5, and these values can differ based on cooking methods and the preparation of food. But for seaweed, these are all categorized by descending chloride levels in them. So we'll start with seaweed, which has the most per serving size, And typically in all these foods, we're going to be looking at 100 grams as their serving size. So in seaweed, we're looking at 200 milligrams of chloride. Seaweed's also very low calorie and high in vitamins. Bacon or any processed meat really will really depend based on the way that it's prepared. But it has about 500 milligrams per serving. It's also high in protein, high in sodium, and high in saturated fats. Celery has about 80 milligrams per serving. It's very low calorie and high in vitamin K and has potassium. Beets have about 40 milligrams of chloride per serving, but they are also high in folate, manganese, and fiber. Romaine lettuce has 20 milligrams of chloride per serving. It's very low in calorie and has a lot of vitamins like vitamin A, C, K, and folate. Some new and interesting research that I found was that in 2018, there was a study that researched hyperchloremia in ICU patients. And before the study, they thought that only about 25 to 45% of ICU patients were actually getting hyperchloremia during their first 24 hours. But after their research, they were thinking and arguing that it's actually closer to about 75%. And this is really important because abnormal chlorine levels can correlate with a higher severity of their disease. So maintaining and controlling the amount of hyperchloremia that occurs on these ICU units should be very controlled, because we don't want those patients to have a worse disease, and controlling this and preventing this could affect their positive outcomes. And here are my references.